When war broke out in the golden days of August 1914, Mountain View County was not without some military history already. Some volunteers had marched in the Boer War, and sometime after 1905, rifle associations were set up in the area by the government as they tried to create an effective militia. The Didsbury Museum shares some of these stories in their military room on the main floor. The first artifact you will see as you enter this room is an ornate bell pump organ from around 1917. The First World War was a singing war. Soldiers used songs to bond and to alleviate the stress and fears encountered at the front, but songs were also written to generate home front support. We've got a few song sheets on exhibit that you just might remember your grandparents singing. 20 years later, news of the Second World War was important to everyone. Our DeForest Cabinet shortwave radio is the type that brought the sounds of war to families back home and also gave government leaders a means of broadcasting war propaganda. It's amazing to imagine the impact this invention had 80-some years ago as Canadians soaked up any information they could get from overseas. Some of our wartime exhibits might seem odd-looking to you, but they were necessities 100 years ago. Gas goggles and gas masks, critical since chlorine gas was first used by the Germans against the French near Ypres. Safety goggles offered eye protection from small projectiles and fragments. And wait till you see what they had available to dig trenches. Cast iron shovels were a heavy but vital tool for trench warfare. They were small because they had to fit in the soldier's pack. In our exhibit is a pointy-ended shovel that served as a spade, a shovel, and a shield. While the sharp edge was originally purposed to cut through roots, it often found its way into the necks of their enemy as one set of soldiers tried to take over another's trench. Ours has a hole in the handle for a wooden helve. These little entrenching tools were not highly regarded by infantrymen. Drones are not new inventions at all, and Flight Sergeant Scotty McNair, an air gunner with the RCAF, wrote his parents, who lived in the Westcott area, that he had been fortunate enough to shoot down 5 Nazi robot bombs. The Didsbury Remote Control Funflyers Airfield is now known as the McNair Airfield. The inventions during wartime were certainly incredible, and while we have many items to see, it was the people whose stories really make our room come to life. For instance, there's Sergeant Ken Waugh, who earned over 20 marksman medals between 1902 and 1935. Waugh served in the Canadian Air Force, and when he returned home, he gave musketry instruction to the Didsbury Boy Scouts rifle team. Waugh is mentioned in several Calgary Herald articles of the 1930s because of his target shooting skills. We have a binder full of attestation papers, personal information that volunteers for the Canadian Expeditionary Force completed during the enlistment process throughout the First World War. For instance, Private David Crosby Archer's papers asked if he was willing to be vaccinated, revaccinated, and inoculated. He said yes. They also recorded that he had a small chickenpox mark on his right shoulder blade. We are proud of our collection of military uniforms from the 3 branches of the Canadian military, the Army, Air Force, and Navy. We have a sailor's uniform from the HMCS Naden, a wooden schooner built in 1913 that was the primary naval training center for Western Canada. This sailor may have been on board the Naden when Captain L.R.W. Beavis was ordered to hide the schooner in one of the numerous inlets along the BC coast. But if the Germans broke the blockade and came, he was ordered to destroy her at once if the Germans discovered her. Captain Goosen with the Royal Canadian Navy donated a jacket and tam to our exhibit. Goosen was a member of the Canadian Coronation Contingent, the Guard of Honor assembled for coronation ceremonies. He attended both the coronations of King George VI in 1937 and the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. Goosen compiled a fabulous autobiography for the Didsbury Museum, and it makes a great lunch hour read, so feel free to skim through the pages while having lunch in our mercantile tea room. Another uniform donated was worn by RCAF pilot officer John Alexander Morton of the Canadian Artillery. This Didsburyan enlisted in 1941 and received a Distinguished Flying Cross, awarded for acts of valor, courage, or devotion to duty performed while flying against the enemy. But Flight Lieutenant Morton has another claim to fame, as a star in the National Film Board of Canada's movie Trainbusters, a 1943 documentary featuring Canadian airplanes destroying a German munitions train. This film was narrated by Canada's Lorne Greene of Bonanza fame. Another brief autobiography accompanies an RCAF uniform worn by Didsbury community leader Joyce Mullen, as she was a member of Alberta Women's Service Corps. Make sure you open the pages of her binder and read about her skill as a target shooter. For those who knew Joyce, you can hear her familiar voice smiling in the words she wrote. As you continue touring the artifacts in this room, you will see many framed photos of Didsburyans who served in World War I or World War II, or both, as well as the many medals earned. In the fall of 2019, the Didsbury Historical Society embarked upon a Veterans Banner project that saw the installation of light post banners honoring local veterans. This is a natural extension of our war memorabilia display and will be added to each year as we honor our hometown veterans. Oftentimes when we think of the wars, we remember the bombers or the pilots, but veteran Tom Patterson, one of the Didsbury vets featured in our banner project and an engine repairman for seaplanes, reminds us the importance of the ground crews and engine repairmen. They were depended on to make sure these flying boats could properly land on the water. Another boy from Westcott, Charlie Snyder, fit hydraulics on Avro Lancaster planes, mostly used for nighttime bombing missions. He earned $1 a day, unless he was testing a plane to make sure it was running right. Then he would make $3 a flight. Sergeant Thomas McHugh will be remembered by many Didsburyans as a breeder of pigeons. He would even give friends pigeons so he could time their flights back to his pigeon coop. McHugh also loved the sound of the train thundering over the tracks through town. To him, it showed signs of prosperity, a comfort for anyone who had served in war. You can also read the story of Robert Hurst, who served as an anti-submarine detection investigator who returned home in July of 1945. As he said, "I think we were going so fast the Germans couldn't figure out what we were." This was a rough job, and as was the Navy tradition, each sailor was given a shot of rum every day, which was the only thing that kept them warm. "We were wet all the time," he said. Hurst spent 592 days on the high seas. Now that's isolation. One very special exhibit is the Didsbury airplane quilt on the north wall. This quilt was made by Mary Jane Clink for their hired man, Leonard McCafferty, when he joined the Royal Canadian Air Force during World War II. It's a beaut and would have kept Mr. McCafferty warm while he served. After World War I, in the summer and fall of 1919, many new homesteads were filed west of Bergen. When a young man started building and remodeling in earnest, the local gossips anticipated the arrival of his war bride. So much reading can be done here, and we sincerely encourage you to pop in and enjoy these stories. Half of this room is dedicated to service organizations like the Lions, Legion, Scouts, Guides, Freemasons, Kinsmen, Women's Institute, and Fire Department. Those stories will come in a later video.